Hello there. All right, guys, in today's video, I'm going to be going over the initial response to a MASCAL event, specifically focused on IDF. I understand this is what we were doing in Iraq in 21-22, and I'll be using this right here to kind of explain like what we were doing. I'm very surprised I still had like that picture on my phone. That was a picture I had taken of the PowerPoint portion of the training that the Norwegian Army's Telemark Battalion like put on for us. So we went through their TCCC course and then learned like what they were doing on like their initial like response. Understand that when we were there, we had 3 MATVs at all times, load up about 3 to 4 individuals, and that was 24/7, had 2 squads working in 12-hour shifts. And we were actually able to get a 4th truck spun up later on in the deployment. Found a sapper and 2 infantrymen that weren't doing anything. They wanted to come ride with us, so it was very helpful to kind of plus those numbers up. So when we went through the course and we got everything that was like, spun up, learned what the Norwegians were doing, helpful for us, because if we were doing all of these like, joint operations, it would kind of suck if we weren't on the same page. So you guys might be able to use this depending on where you guys are like at. Every base is going to be able to do it a little bit like differently. It is a lot easier having an actual QRF that can respond and say like, one ISART, one ESART sort of like deal. So I hope this helps and you guys like learn something. So stick around. Okay, so what you guys end up seeing like right here, for the most part, this is more of like a command and control thing for like that squad leader, okay? So when we go like to show up, you'll typically kind of like hear like that thing, especially outside the wire, drivers and gunners stay in the vehicles. Drivers, yes, stick with the vehicles because we're gonna be utilizing those vehicles here in a little bit to start like, CASEVACing folks over to the, I believe it was a roll 2 that we had there. But gunners, there's nothing for you to shoot at, get your ass down, like go like, help. So we're getting all of our guys like out and the squad leader is yelling out, around like, the area where that point of impact was. If you can walk towards me, walk towards me. And if you can't walk towards me, but you're conscious, give me a sign, raise your arm. Having those guys that aren't as injured being able to walk themselves, like, out of like the way, extremely helpful. What we're looking for are those folks that are down on the ground, they are injured, and they're not making a sign, or they're not screaming. So those are the guys that we are heading to first, and that is where we're applying that M&A of like the march. So we want to be able to control that massive bleeding, so throwing on like, tourniquets and make sure their airway is open. If somebody is screaming, their airway is open. All right. So this here is just kind of like a helpful way of like, being able to get to and treat the guys like in like the right like order. But we also knew that the Task Force Viking, the Norwegian Army, those guys are going to be showing up as well. And these guys drove not just their gun trucks, but also this really massive truck for their medics. So they had, medics and a doctor that would also show up on scene. So we would end up marking these guys. So anybody that was like, seriously like, injured, those guys are getting marked in red. Those guys that were like, not like, as like, injured, couldn't walk by themselves, but, they were at least like conscious, mark those guys in yellow. The other guys being marked in green, just because we still have to do like some sort of like follow up, whether that be from like, TBIs, or maybe they've got like, small shrapnel wounds that like, they don't notice yet. I have had guys that have been like, hit with an IED, got the back of like, his neck, like all like screwed up, didn't even know until someone was like, hey man, you're bleeding. All right. So, so we still want to make sure that everybody, does get treatment. When it comes down to, actually CASEVACing like folks. So in like the MATVs, the litters that we had were extremely like long. They wouldn't actually fit in there. So if we had litter patients, this is here's also, a huge shout out to the Norwegians. They were able to show us how we could get those large litters up onto the very back of the MATV. So we would put those on the back of the MATV. I'll see if we can find some pictures like of it. But we were to get those guys like up there, and the gunner we would actually have like standing in the back like with them. Understand that we didn't really have anything that was like there like in the back. So being able to have like that litter like loaded on, and then like that, so then we'd make sure that it was like, it was secured, it was like strapped down, and that gunner there is kind of like, keep, their eye on them, make sure they're going to be okay and not fall off, or just in case they're like choking or something, we'd have somebody there to kind of like, give them that, that medical treatment while we were en route. Just understand that even talking to the first sergeant for like the MCAS, those guys were not going anywhere until they'd gotten like the all clear. So we were told, even like by him, you can take guys to a casualty collection point, but sometimes he might be moving those guys there just to die. So said if there's guys that were like, seriously injured, I said those are the guys that we were going to get like medevaced actually to that roll 2. So he said, so this here's it's not like super like in depth. Always rely on like your training for that TCCC. Try to get Army CLS if you can, like as well. Like the more medical training you have, like the better. Just understand that kicking indoors, doing like CQB, like there's guys that they love to practice all of like that stuff, but kind of like focus more on what your actual threat is. For us, ground attack, very, very like, unlikely, but, rockets, drones, missiles, things like that, mortars, was something that we definitely had to focus a little bit more on. So he said, I hope this helps. If you guys got any questions, put it down in the comments, shoot me a message. Said, once again, I'm here for y'all. Later.